Tim Hague Reads Books, presented by Tim Hague. A woman dies for no apparent reason in a church in Fleet Street. A pair of children were playing witch hunter nearby, and they placed a curse on her. Further equally inexplicable deaths follow soon after. This is meat and drink to Bryant and May, the superannuated detectives in Christopher Fowler's entertaining series. Fowler gained an enviable reputation as a writer of what he calls dark fiction, and his brilliant feel for the underside of life feeds in satisfyingly to his more recent persona as a writer of cheerful murder mysteries. After spending a delightful week with Bryant and May in the shadows and basements and secret places of London, Tim met Chris in the airy reassurance of a penthouse terrace in King's Cross to the accompaniment of a stiff breeze and the sounds of the metropolis.
This is Tim Hague Reads Books, and today the book is Christopher Fowler's new Bryant and May book, Bryant and May and the Invisible Code. We're here actually on a beautiful afternoon on the terrace of his penthouse apartment. Thank you for having us, Chris.
Very nice to see you, Tim.
Now, I thought I was a Christopher Fowler fan. I have read a stack of your books, 8 or 9, and then when I was looking into this, I realised I've barely scratched the surface, have I? You've written...
Yeah, it's a frightening number, actually.
Have you any idea how many you do?
Somewhere in the 40s. But actually, on the big scheme of things, for a writer, that's... In the past, people wrote about 150 books in their career, so I figure I'm still on the low side.
Yeah, so the David Foster Wallace approach is...
A lot of let's say, the jobbing writers of the 30s and 40s wrote between 100 and 150 novels. It's not unusual.
Well,
they don't do it now.
I first came across you with Spanky, which was a big success for you, and I thought it was just fantastic. I was an instant fan, and that was very much, you were working very much in the sort of horror genre back then.
It was kind of dark fiction. I've never really worked in sort of what we would call the mainstream. I've always been slightly around the edges of it. So dark fiction, fantastical elements in a realistic story, I think. Spanky was an unusual one because it can be read as an entirely realistic psychological story. A man with a split personality.
Sort of Fight Club number, you mean?
Well, yeah, Fight Club actually did come out the same year, which was really annoying.
Yeah, Spanky was better than Fight Club.
Thank you very much for saying so. I didn't get filmed, but came very close to it.
The Bryant and May and the Invisible Code. I was delighted when you used Bryant and May, because that was matches when I was a boy.
Yep.
It was and I thought he's never going to get away with that when I first came across them, and I thought, yeah, he has.
I know, because actually it's amazing how few people realise there were matches, because they've gone now, of course. In the course of writing these books, the company's folded.
Bryant and May and the Invisible Code is the 10th book in the series. Again, I'm so ashamed. I was aware of them because I've come across Bryant and May before the series. There was one called Soho Black, and they were in a couple of your other books as peripheral characters.
Yeah, I was trying them out.
You were trying, and then you've developed them into a series, but. This is the 10th one? How did I miss them?
I didn't think they were going to go to 10. I did one. The first one actually was turned down by the publisher because they thought there was no mileage in 2 elderly characters. Because they said, isn't it going to be a bit boring with these sort of old people? There's not going to be much sex and fighting. And I said, that's the whole point. They'll have time to do other things.
I bet you're a bit cross about New Tricks as well, then, aren't you?
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Have you not?
I've never seen it.
Oh,
I don't watch TV.
They work on it's the Unsolved Crimes case. Now, your unit's called the Peculiar Crimes Unit, which I thought is just a brilliant idea. To give you the most interesting subjects to write about, you make it just people who just investigate peculiar ones.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually stems from something that has an element of truth in it. My father worked in a scientific unit during the war, and was one of many scientific units that were set up in slightly oddball units. They were normally run by sort of 19 to 20-year-olds. They were the real cream of the scientific crop coming in to help the government. The Churchill government hired the Royal Academy to develop all of their camouflage tactics against the Germans. They hired Dennis Wheatley to work out what the Germans might do next.
And he was as nutty as a fruitcake.
Balmy. And of course he actually ended up working in the War Office as well, which is perfect for him. It was his dream job. So my unit wasn't actually that weird an idea.
Yeah, Bryant and May are not the 20-somethings bright young things, though, are they? They're fairly well. In this, they're superannuated. Some of the other books have gone back to earlier cases for them. Let's talk about Bryant and May a bit.
Sure.
Basically, you've got these two principal characters, Arthur Bryant, John May. They're partners. They're very different. In fact, you even helpfully at one point in the book, you have Bryant characterize them, don't he? He says to John May something like, "You're the kind of person who always wants there to be a solution that's the best and most obvious solution from the beginning of the facts, and I'm not like that." And that's how you've divided them.
Yeah, very much so. What I've done is taken Golden Age detectives and just chucked them in the modern world. So that way you get this kind of weird disparity between an old-fashioned way of thinking, and they're forced into a world with CCTV and mobile phones and electronic devices.
Well, again, you've divided that. Bryant is very much the one who isn't au fait with the technological stuff. He's the one who knows everything and has a book for everything. And John May John May drives. I mean, Bryant doesn't even drive, does he?
No, he tries to drive a battered old Mini, but is every now and again he's normally forbidden from driving it because you have to start it with a teaspoon. Because it's something my dad used to do. It was the only way you could get it out of first was by sticking an apostle spoon down the back of the shift. So he does these sort of. He's very quirky.
Yeah, he doesn't go for the right solution. He goes round to find a different solution to everything.
Yeah,
and of
he
course,
gets lost in
that's
books.
the way he solves his crimes as well.
Yeah, he gets lost in arcana and peculiarities about London, and by doing so, normally uncovers something that no one else would ever have thought of.
Well, that's pretty much your stock in trade as well. I mean, in a way, there are actually three main characters. There's a lot of other characters.
I know what you're
going to say,
London.
Characters. Of course, London
Yeah.
is the third character, because you are in love with London and what you can find out, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm born and raised here, and it's an ancient city. I think if I was born and raised in Paris, I'd probably be doing the same thing there. But
and finding out as many weird and wonderful things about it.
Yeah, I think you do. And there's a reason why the last few books have been set in King's Cross, because I'm living in King's Cross, and the more you get talking to local people. I mean, I try to do as much from talking to people as hanging around old bookshops and libraries, because one of the problems of digging out an arcane subject, particularly if you do it online, is you always end up going back to the same 3 or 4 sources. And that gets a bit boring. If I go to one more talk about 19th century London and hear about Oscar Wilde, I'll go nuts, because there were so many more interesting things happening than Oscar Wilde. I mean, obviously that's a great story. There are other stories to tell as well.
Yeah, and what you do then is you've dug out an enormous amount of stuff. There are all sorts of details, lots of stories. I mean, there's one point where you have Sabira Kasabian, who's one of your characters. She's one of the principal characters, going to the London Central Mosque, and you just can't help telling us the origin of the mosque. The land was actually sequestered by the Churchill government.
Yes.
To thank the Muslims of the empire for their help during the Second World War. Now, those details are not necessary to the plot that we're reading, but you just love putting that in, don't you?
Well, also, I actually think people do like to know about that stuff, because whenever I do a public audience, people always come up and say, "I've learnt so much about something. You've made me dig into that subject more deeply, and it's actually very interesting." But I try not to go. I try not to turn into a sort of Peter Ackroyd and just make it about London. I try to keep the story moving forward.
Yes.
I have to be a bit careful, because
and there is a temptation with that. But Peter Ackroyd, he has that characteristic of thinking that he knows better than everybody else. And with yours, there's just a sort of glee in I've got this stuff, I can tell you all about it. So, I mean, you take us to lots of locations that some of them I know, so I know that they're right. There's St Bride's Church in Fleet Street, where the first murder happens. This one I know is true because I know the church. I've been into it. The Guildhall, you described the pictures of Gog and Magog looking down at the diners. I've seen that. I know that's true. Do you make anything up, or do you make a sort of is it a point of pride to?
It is a point of pride. I'd really, really try not to make stuff up. I go to a non-fiction writers' night once a month. I mean, it's a bunch of people in a pub, but it's they're also fascinated with London, and they often come up with peculiar facts about London that that then I start following leads from. And so yeah, it is a bit of a matter of pride not to make stuff up. Obviously the plots are made up, but I always say in the books that the weirder things are the truest ones. Some of the most unbelievable facts are true.
So you've got a bit of the crown of thorns, of Christ's crown of thorns, in the basement of the British Museum. Is that true? I mean, would I find
this
that
thing? Yeah, this relic, which is supposed to have a thorn, and the idea that it might be blood and not a thorn was my addition. But the whole description of the actual object is exactly as it's described in the museum.
Well, I was sure it was, because all the things that I do know, you're so accurate about that. One sort of develops a certain kind of faith. Would you let Bryant and May go anywhere that wasn't true, or that wasn't really there?
I think I find that really difficult now, because I think people would call me on it and say, "Well, you made this bit up." There's been an idea to take them to America and do something, with them in New York, but I actually don't feel confident enough in knowing enough about New York. I think it would take a lot more.
But the research was tax deductible.
There you go. Yeah, that'd be good.
So
take them to the Bahamas then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Where do you really want to go?
Rio.
I believe they're having something on in Rio in a few years. I'm going to book it in.
Yeah, there you go.
The first time I came across Bryant and May, I think, was Soho Black, which had non-natural element to it, and you leave open the question for most of the book whether these murders are supernatural or not. I thought that was terribly clever, because of course they could be, given your background and given Bryant and May's background, or they could have a natural explanation. Tell me about the supernatural, or the implications. You've got witches implied. You've got why all that?
Partly because it's actually part of London history. I mean, you have to bear in mind that the last British witch trial was 1944.
Was it really?
Yep.
In London?
It was in the Midlands.
Uh-huh.
I think it was in the Midlands. The thing about Alistair Crowley living in the end of the Caledonian Road in King's Cross is entirely true. The details are actually correct.
You've taken his house, haven't you, to use as the... In fact, what I'm going to do, can I ask you to read that paragraph? Because
sure.
At the beginning of the book, there's a memo from the boss of the unit, and he's saying, could we all just calm down a bit? So if I give you the book, if it's on page 12, that paragraph will be lovely.
Okay, this was a housekeeping note to the rest of the staff from the acting boss of the Peculiar Crimes Unit, Raymond Land. I want to put the rumours to rest about our new building once and for all. While it appears to be true that a Mr. Alistair Crowley once held meetings here and decorated the wall of my office with inappropriate images of young ladies and aroused livestock, the building is most emphatically not haunted. It's an old property with a colourful history and has Victorian pipes and floorboards. The noises these make at night are quite normal and certainly don't sound like the, quote, death rattles of trapped souls, as I overheard Mira telling someone on the phone. May I remind you that you are British officers of the law and are not required to have any imagination.
See, that was the first time I chuckled, and that's on page 12. So I knew I was going to enjoy it. I should put my cards on the table. I loved this book. I think it rattles along with an enormous verve and energy. It's got everything. It's got all that information about London. It's got murders. It's got an investigation. How? Why all of that?
Actually, I find the books are getting easier, because now that I don't have this incredible mushiness to get all of the London detail into every book, I actually feel like I can take one subject each time. So this one is partly about London's hidden codes. So there's as you know, there are two codes at work in the book. There's an actual physical code that's hidden in the murders, but there's also the invisible code of London class, and it was
class and gender. Actually.
Class and gender, because it was loosely based on something I read about the wife of a diplomat who did an interview in, I think, Daily Telegraph, complaining that she felt excluded from British society, even though she was better read and spoke more languages than most.
So that gave you Severa Kasabian, the first real sort of subject of the crimes that are happening. She's not the first murder, but she's the first subject of the crimes. And she's, it was Armenian. Where's she from?
Gosh, you got me now.
She's from somewhere else.
She's from Eastern Europe, and
she's married a
despite
high
her
up in the
intellect,
British
she's not.
government.
Yeah, she's not taken seriously. More by the, not by her partner, but by the people that surround him and are kowtowing to him, who then treat her as an outsider, which seems to be quite a common thing that I've heard from other people, that although they do find the English quite, basically friendly, they are gently but firmly treated as outsiders for quite a long period of time.
Now, she has quite a lot to do with, there are 3 wives, of course there are 3, because you're making a reference to 3 witches, of other high-ups in the government. And it's quite interesting, I don't know if you did it deliberately, but the wives came across more clearly defined than their husbands. And in fact, you've got a line in the book about one of the wives says something like, "Well, if I want to know what a man in position of power thinks, I just ask his wife."
I really like writing strong women. I did a play last year called Celebrity about a strong woman, and in fact we're just workshopping it now for the West End next year, which is now called Falling Stars, and it's about a female PR agent in her 50s, and one of the things I found easiest about that was casting it, because there were hundreds of women available who said, "Thank God somebody's writing for stronger older women," again, because I actually really enjoyed doing that.
And stronger older women are interesting.
Yeah,
they've got so much going on with them.
Yeah.
We've got gender there, but you started off talking about class, and class is a big deal of this. You've even given Bryant a little riff on class early on in the book to sort of introduce the subject. When he says something, they're terrified of having their plasma televisions taken away. You brought in this Eastern European lady almost to point that up, because of course the British put up with class.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing that when people come to the UK, it's the first thing they notice, and it's the last thing that the English ever want to talk about. And everybody always feels that it's the middle class that actually are the most aggrieved, of all the classes. I always think of those old sketches with Ronnie Corbett and John Cleese on the Frost show, where there's 3 of them standing in a row. I look up to him, but I look down at him. Do you remember those?
Oh yes, yeah. TW3, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. And that was the first time I even ever thought about class was as a kid, and it's always been really, really fascinating. Sort of coming from this sort of vaguely lower middle class family of professional parents who were always broke and where they saw themselves.
You mentioned that Spanky had never been made into a movie. These would make a TV show. Would you like to see it? Is it something that you'd aspire to?
I would. Yeah, they've been in and out of option for years, and last year we had cast Michael Gambon and Derek Jacobi.
I was wondering who you'd cast. Yes, they would work. Yeah. I wondered, how about Simon Russell Beale? He's a little young for the old Bryant, but then you could do the flashbacks, couldn't you?
Well, but that's also quite good. I mean, I think you need to cast them young, because if a TV series is around for a few years, you need them fairly young and limber. Because actually, I make them do quite a lot of things that older people wouldn't necessarily do. I think in the first couple of books, I put them down drains and up the tops of buildings and things like that.
So James Bolam's definitely out of the running now.
Yes.
In your blog, you say that this is the end of a narrative arc. You've written 10, and there were 2 narrative arcs, and I thought that was very interesting. Partly because I have no idea what you mean. What do you mean by that?
Well, when you get a TV series that has a kind of overarching narrative arc, like X-Files was always coming back to the cigarette smoking guy, and well, in fact, there's a narrative arc to book 6, and then there's a bigger one to 12, which is this sort of government conspiracy thing that's been bubbling around through. In fact, if you look back through the books, you'll find that I hide in them as a kind of reward point scheme for loyal readers. If they wanted to look at the 10 books as one big story, there's stuff in the 10th that's referred to in the 2nd and 3rd books. So, in fact, I did actually have a big scheme.
You're J.K. Rowling in disguise.
But it's a funny thing, you know. I've always had this tendency towards big arching themes. I used to draw comics when I was a very small kid.
I did too.
I look back at them. I've got stacks of them in the cupboard, and they had these giant themes that went for hundreds of pages. So it was obviously something. I'm surprised I didn't just drift off into doing science fiction series with huge universes, because that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid creating. Really, I try to keep it down to a manageable number of characters that people can follow easily.
Can we indulge me and go back to one or two of the detailed things that you've put in? One of the things which I thought was lovely is Bryant says he doesn't want to die in a car accident. He doesn't want to be a cellotaph. What's a cellotaph?
A cellotaph is when people sellotape bunches of flowers to a lamppost.
You haven't coined that. That's
no, I just heard it. I mean, there's always ones in King's Cross. I remember hearing somebody say, "Oh, we've got another cellotaph."
I'm gonna steal that word now. That's a useful one. And then you've got a reference to there's a wig club that were in the 17th century.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell me about the wig club in Edinburgh.
The pubic hair wigs that were made. This is part of the sort of vice clubs of Britain. That there's a whole bunch of hellfire clubs that had phallic shaped goblets and this. You're supposed to have to put on this wig of woven of pubic hair. I mean, I know the phallic-shaped goblets are real because I've seen photographs of them at the British Library, but I haven't actually tracked down the picture of the wig one. Sounds rather fanciful, but it's referenced quite frequently.
And they all caught lice from it because it was
because it was passed around.
passed around.
Not a very clean time. One of the things is, it's a lot easier to research the more recent parts of London history. Then the further back you go, the fewer and fewer sources you get to, and you keep coming back to the same handful of stories.
Whenever I've met a policeman, they tell me that when they admit in a social gathering or something that they're a policeman, then everybody is always a little bit reserved. They just back off an inch from them. Do you find that as an author as well?
Well, actually, quite a lot of people really want to be put in your book, and I just saw this T-shirt saying, "Careful, you might be in my next novel," which I felt like buying. But what's weird is there is a correlation between policemen and crime writers that's quite natural, and there's a woman police officer who I've become friends with around here, who's incredibly erudite and interested in the local history of the area, and she tells me all about her investigations and things that the stuff that she's allowed to tell me, and she gives me the kind of details that I would never ever have thought of in a million years. Can I give you one?
Oh, please. I was hoping you would.
Yeah. She said she really likes doing. She used to really like doing watching on in council estates, watching, say, a crack den or somewhere where people were coming in and out every 15 minutes through the night. She used to enjoy the roof surveillance, because she said that all the pigeon excrement up there, all the ammonia, really cleared her sinuses because she suffered from a blocked nose.
Oh, you could put that in a book.
I already have.
Yeah, because that's lived detail, is that?
Yeah, you don't get that now. You don't get that on the internet.
Well, the book is Bryant and May and the Invisible Code. It's published by Doubleday. It's $16.99. I know it's out already because it's been out for a couple of weeks, I think. More Bryant and May books on the way.
Yes, indeed. Bryant and May and the Bleeding Heart, and Bryant and May and the Burning Man.
Chris, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
That was Tim Hague Reads Books. Tim Hague Reads Books is a Green Shoot production. You can find out more at www.green-shoot.com, and Tim can be contacted on tim@green-shoot.com.